Sometimes the strongest-looking person in the room is the most fragile one. The loudest voice, the most perfect posture, the smug half-smile, all of it. Armor. And deep down, not even theirs. You've seen them. Maybe you've loved one. Maybe you've tried to reach someone who wore a face that didn't match their heart. Someone who claimed they didn't need anything from you except your constant devotion. Someone who blamed, shamed, and manipulated not because they were powerful, but because they were terrified you'd see how hollow it really was behind the mask. There's something about a narcissist's confidence that feels manufactured, like a movie set. It looks impressive from far away, but the closer you get, the more you realize the walls are cardboard, the smiles are rehearsed, and the eyes? Empty. But here's the thing most people don't tell you. Their false confidence isn't just fragile, it's desperate. And there is one thing that breaks it instantly, and it's not shouting, it's not arguing, it's not calling them out in a dramatic confrontation. It's quieter than that, more dangerous to them than rage, more honest than any insult. And maybe, if you've ever tried to survive the emotional labyrinth of someone who makes you feel both invisible and responsible at the same time, you already know what that one thing is. Today, you're not here to analyze them. You're here to remember yourself, to feel seen in the places they never acknowledged, to hear the things you once tried to whisper to someone who only ever heard themselves. This is for anyone who's been told you're too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic when all you were doing was trying to connect. This is for the quiet ones who've cried in locked bathrooms, questioned their worth in the middle of the night, tried to fix someone who was never planning to change. This is for you. And no, you're not crazy, you're not overthinking. You're just waking up. So take a breath, stay with me. Because once you see the one thing that shatters their illusion, you'll never unsee it. And more importantly, you'll never shrink for it again. If this already feels like it's for you, make sure you subscribe. Not because you owe anyone, but because you deserve spaces that speak the truth without making you feel broken for needing it. You deserve to not feel alone when the mask finally falls off. It starts small, a pause that lasts a second too long, a simple sentence that's too calm to argue with. You say something they can't twist, something real, something steady, and suddenly, their face changes. You just gave them what they fear most, not chaos, not confrontation, but clarity. Because the one thing that breaks a narcissist's false confidence is your quiet certainty. That moment when you stop performing, stop explaining, stop trying to make them see you, and you just see them instead, clearly, without the story, without the excuses. It's like holding up a mirror, not the kind they pose in front of, but the kind that shows what they've been running from their whole life. And that terrifies them, because a narcissist isn't afraid of being hated. They're afraid of being irrelevant, of being seen without the mask, of losing control of the image. You stop reacting, you stop trying to win them back, you stop believing their version of you, they lose their grip, and they know it. But they don't panic in the way you'd expect. It's not loud, not at first. It's subtle, a shift in tone, a weaponized compliment, a sudden guilt trip disguised as concern. They might say, "You've changed." What they mean is, "You've stopped feeding me." You've stopped needing them to validate what you know in your gut. And in that moment, you become dangerous not because you attack, but because you no longer seek approval from someone who profits off your confusion. That's what breaks them. They can handle being the villain in your story, as long as you keep writing them into it. But the second you close the book and walk away, not with rage, not with tears, just with self-trust, they start to unravel, because now they have to sit with themselves. And that silence, that's where the cracks form. Somewhere inside they've always known. That's why they talk so much, why they interrupt, why they laugh at the wrong time, or lie when the truth would have been easier. It's not about you. It never was. They don't fight to be loved. They fight to not be exposed. They aren't protecting a heart. They're protecting a hollow. And you've spent too long trying to offer love to a wound that devours it like fire. You thought you could heal them, understand them, save them, but you were never holding a broken person. You were holding a performance. And no matter how sincere your love was, it couldn't reach them, because they weren't present. Only the mask was. And it's not your job to fix what they pretend isn't broken. That truth hurts, but it also sets you free. Because the moment you stop trying to be enough for someone who refuses to be seen, you remember something bigger. You were never the broken one. You were the mirror, and they couldn't stand the reflection. You may not remember the exact day it happened, that shift. That moment your body stopped leaning in and started pulling back. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks, no final speech, just a quiet click deep inside, when something in you whispered, "This doesn't feel like love." You didn't leave right away. Most people don't, because with narcissists, it's never just bad. It's a loop, a cycle, a high followed by a crash, followed by an apology wrapped in manipulation, wrapped in just enough charm to make you doubt your own pain. They study you. They know what makes you melt, what makes you stay, what you crave, and they mimic it, but none of it is real. Not the apology, not the affection, not the connection. What is real is how it leaves you afterward, disoriented, unsteady, like someone erased your name off the inside of your own heart. That's not love. That's gaslighting. The scariest part isn't that they fooled you. It's that, for a while, you started to join in. You started editing yourself, shrinking your voice, numbing your instincts, smiling when you wanted to cry, saying it's fine when it wasn't, hoping your softness could thaw someone who only felt powerful when you were small. That's the trap, not the manipulation, the hope. Because you hope they'll change. You hope they'll finally see you. You hope the love you give will eventually be returned. But a narcissist doesn't want love. They want fuel. Your pain feeds them. Your confusion keeps them dominant. Your attention, even your rage, tells them they still matter more than you do. And once you stop giving them that, their empire begins to fall apart. You don't even have to leave. Sometimes, just your emotional detachment is enough to send them spiraling. You say okay instead of defending yourself. You don't rise to their bait. You're no longer triggered by their silence, no longer chasing their crumbs, and suddenly they panic. They might try to love bomb you again, pull out all the stops, tell you they were wrong, that you're their soulmate, that no one else gets them like you do. And if that doesn't work, they'll flip. Now you're the narcissist. You're cold, ungrateful, impossible to please. They'll rewrite the whole story to make themselves the victim, because the second you stop dancing for them, they lose control of the narrative. But here's the thing. They were never in control of you. They only controlled what you were willing to abandon in yourself. Your worth, your boundaries, your voice. And the moment you reclaim those, even quietly, even without a word, it's like the spell breaks. You begin to see clearly. Patterns that once confused you now disgust you. Things you once tolerated now feel unbearable. And the mask they wore, it stops fitting. It slips just enough for you to see the fear underneath, the desperation, the tiny child inside, frozen in time, who decided that power was safer than intimacy. You don't hate them. You don't even need revenge. You just know better now. And that knowing is what they can't survive. Not because you exposed them to the world, but because you exposed them to themselves. There's a moment in every survivor's journey that feels like stillness. Not peace, not yet, but stillness. A kind of emptiness that follows the storm. After the tears dry, after the chaos stops, after you stop checking your phone for a message that no longer matters, it's in that stillness that the truth arrives, not loud, not angry, just honest. You realize you were never too much. You were never broken. You were simply someone who kept handing over your light to someone who couldn't hold it. And now, you've stopped. You stopped trying to be chosen by someone who only chose themselves. You stopped giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who used your empathy as a weapon. You stopped romanticizing pain and calling it passion. That's what they fear, not your anger, but your clarity. Because clarity means they can no longer control the story. You no longer believe their version of what happened. You no longer carry their shame like it belongs to you. They might try to come back. Most do, but this time their words hit different. They sound empty. You feel nothing, because now you see the pattern, the loop, the hook. Now you understand the difference between love and obligation, between devotion and self-abandonment, between chemistry and trauma bonds. They say all the right things, but you've heard it before, and you know how it ends. So you don't fight, you don't explain, you just don't participate. And that is how you win, not by changing them, but by no longer letting them change you. Because real healing doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away without slamming the door. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace over closure. You realize you don't need them to admit what they did. You don't need them to confess, or break down, or finally understand. You just need you present, honest, whole. And that's what they were trying to keep you from all along, because someone rooted in self-trust is unshakable. You can't gaslight someone who listens to their gut. You can't manipulate someone who no longer fears being alone. You can't own someone who has returned to themselves. And the ones who survive narcissistic abuse, they don't come out weak. They come out wise, fierce, quietly powerful, because they've stared into the hollow. They've been consumed by it, and they've walked out, soul intact. That's what they don't want you to know, that the moment you stop trying to be loved by someone incapable of love is the moment you finally learn what love actually feels like. And it starts with you. You start noticing the small things first. How your body doesn't flinch at every text tone anymore. How you sleep through the night without rehearsing conversations in your head. How you laugh not performatively, Not to ease tension, but because something actually feels funny again. You start trusting your own rhythm. You say no and don't apologize. You speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. You take up space not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you finally know you belong here. That's what healing feels like. It's not dramatic. It's sacred, because when you've spent years being twisted into a shape that pleases someone else, even standing still in your truth feels radical, and they'll feel it. They always do. They'll sense your shift, your absence, your light no longer aimed at them, and it'll unnerve them. They'll try again. A breadcrumb, a memory, a song they know you loved, a fake emergency. But this time, your heart doesn't flinch, because you're not trying to rewrite the past anymore. You're not holding on to the version of them you imagined. You're not waiting for the moment they finally become the person they pretended to be. You've grieved that dream, and you're done sacrificing your peace for someone else's illusion. You realize they never saw you not really. They only saw what you could give them. Your warmth, your loyalty, your softness, your ability to forgive, but they never touched your soul with care. They only consumed it, and now, they don't have access to it anymore. Not because you're bitter, not because you're cold, but because you finally understand the cost. Your love is not free, it's sacred. And you'll never again waste it on someone who treats it like a mirror instead of a gift. Because here's what they never counted on: that you'd wake up, that you'd stop seeing yourself through their broken lens, that you'd stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "Why did I let someone make me feel like love had to hurt?" They thought they had you, because they confused your empathy with weakness. But what they didn't know is that the most dangerous kind of love is the kind that learns to protect itself. You no longer chase, you no longer explain, you no longer beg to be heard. You listen to yourself, and that's the one thing their false confidence can't survive. Because it's not just that you see through them now, it's that you've remembered who you were before they convinced you otherwise. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to shout. It's quiet, steady. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything because it knows what it is. That's who you're becoming now. Not a version of yourself polished to please. Not a role you learned to survive. But the real you, the one buried beneath years of shape-shifting, people-pleasing, over-explaining. The one who was always there, waiting. It doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes healing looks like crying in your car after pretending to be okay all day. Sometimes it looks like deleting the number you memorized by heart. Sometimes it looks like choosing solitude over company that drains you. But every time you choose yourself in the smallest of ways, you reclaim what they tried to take. And no, they didn't win. They just delayed your return to yourself. Because now you're not chasing their validation. You're not stuck in their maze. You're not stuck, period. You're free, and not just from them. From the voice in your head that used to echo their words. From the doubt that told you maybe you were too emotional. From the fear that said if you stop giving, you'll stop being loved. That fear kept you quiet. That fear kept you hooked. That fear kept you small. But look at you now. You've stared down abandonment and chose presence. You've touched your own wounds without numbing. You've walked away from the performance and stepped into your own skin. That's not weakness. That's resilience. And now, you carry something they never will. Integrity. You don't need to manipulate to be seen. You don't need to perform to be loved. You don't need to tear someone down just to feel tall, because you've done the work. You've looked at your own patterns. You've owned your part. You've healed what they refused to touch. You've forgiven yourself for what you didn't know. And now, you are the storm they cannot control. Not because you yell, but because you won't play. Not because you seek revenge, but because you seek truth. Not because you're better, but because you've chosen to become whole. That's what shatters the illusion. Not revenge, not anger, not making them pay, but becoming so rooted in your own truth. Their opinion no longer has a key to your nervous system. They can call you anything they want. It doesn't reach you anymore, because you no longer live in their version of the story. You're writing your own. You didn't need them to love you perfectly. You just needed them to love you honestly. But that was never part of the deal, not with someone who wears identity like costume, not with someone who sees vulnerability as weakness. So you bent. You softened. You tried harder. You learned how to read the weather in their moods, how to shrink your feelings into something less threatening, how to disappear without ever leaving the room. And they mistook your loyalty for foolishness. But love was never your weakness. It was your strength. The problem wasn't that you gave too much. It's that they gave nothing real in return. And still, you stayed. Not because you didn't know better, but because you hoped. You hoped if you just loved them more purely, more patiently, more deeply, they'd finally feel safe enough to take off the mask. But the mask was the person. You were loving a version, a projection, a mirror of what they thought would make you stay. And the truth is, it worked. For a while, because love isn't logical. Especially when your inner child still thinks love has to be earned. You were a naive. You were conditioned. Conditioned to believe that if someone pulls away, you must chase. If they blame you, you must fix it. If they go silent, you must speak louder. If they hurt you, you must have done something to deserve it. That's not love. That's survival. But something in you cracked open. Maybe it was the final betrayal. Maybe it was the way they looked at you, not with remorse, but with disgust after you gave them everything. Maybe it was just that quiet ache in your chest that finally became too loud to ignore. You didn't walk away because you stopped loving them. You walked away because you started loving yourself more. And they'll never understand that. Because for them, love is control, love is image, love is possession. But for you, love is presence, safety, truth. And that's why they'll never reach the depths you've touched. You've been shattered. You've been stripped down. You've rebuilt from pieces they left behind. But now, you're whole in a way they'll never be. Because you didn't escape pain by running. You sat with it, faced it, met it with compassion, and in doing so, you became untouchable. Not because you're numb, but because you're real. They'll talk about you, not to honor you, but to reclaim the version of you they could control. The version that doubted herself, the version that stayed quiet, the version that bent. They'll say you changed, that you flipped, that you were never who you claimed to be. They'll paint themselves as the one who tried, as the one who suffered, because the truth, the real truth, is too terrifying for them to face. You saw them, and you walked away anyway. You didn't try to destroy them. You just stopped allowing them to destroy you. And that, to someone who lives off illusion, feels like betrayal. But you owe them no explanation. You don't need to correct the story they tell, because the people who matter, they feel your truth. They see it in your eyes, in your peace, in the weight you no longer carry. And more importantly, you see it in the mirror, in the way your nervous system has calmed, in the way your body finally unclenches. That's the real win. Not proving you were right, but no longer needing to be. You stop thinking in terms of what if. What if they'd changed? What if you'd stayed? What if they finally realized what they lost? None of that matters anymore, because what they lost was someone rare, someone who cared even after being hurt, someone who showed up with real love, even when they didn't deserve it, someone who tried to understand when they themselves were incomprehensible. But what you lost confusion, you lost chaos, you lost the constant pressure to be something more, something better, something smaller. You lost the belief that love means suffering. You lost the addiction to approval. You lost the need to be chosen by someone who never truly looked at you. And in its place, you found something quieter, something stronger, self-respect. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it just sits there, unshakable. That's what narcissists can't comprehend, that someone can walk away, not to manipulate, not to punish, but to preserve their soul. You didn't need revenge. You needed peace, and you chose it. Even when it hurt, even when the silence was deafening, even when your heart still ached, you chose it, because deep down, you knew. Nothing is more painful than betraying yourself to stay loyal to someone who was never loyal to you. They still live in the performance. You live in the truth. And truth doesn't need validation. One day, you'll look back and realize the silence saved you. Not the silence they used to punish you, but the silence you chose when you finally stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped begging to be seen, when you let the storm pass through without offering it shelter in your chest. That silence was you, reclaiming your life. There's no victory speech, no cinematic moment where everything clicks and the pain vanishes. Healing isn't a highlight reel. It's 1,000 quiet choices you make when no one is watching. It's saying no when you used to say yes just to keep the peace. It's choosing solitude over company that drains you. It's putting your hand on your own heart when the ache comes and whispering, "I'm still here." And in that space, something new grows. Not bitterness, not walls, but discernment, depth, boundaries rooted in love, not fear. You'll meet people who ask nothing of you but your presence, who don't need you to be smaller to love you, who feel like safety, not a test. And you'll feel the difference immediately, because you've known what it's like to be starved while calling it devotion. You've tasted the counterfeit. You'll never settle for less than the real thing again. That's what they never saw coming. That you'd rise not with rage, but with reverence for your own spirit. That you'd stop trying to be enough for someone committed to emptiness. That you'd finally turn your love, that deep, rare, all-consuming love, toward yourself. And if they're still watching from the sidelines, still spinning stories, still looking for cracks, let them. They can't touch what they never truly knew, because the person you've become, this version of you, built from truth and tenderness and fire, is untouchable. You don't need closure from them. You were the closure. You don't need justice. You are the justice. You don't need them to see your worth. You remembered it. So here's to the quiet ones, the lovers, the healers, the feelers, the empaths, the ones who almost lost themselves trying to rescue someone else. You didn't lose. You found something priceless. You, And now that you have, you'll never let her go again. If this story echoed something inside you, stay close. Subscribe, like, share it with someone who needs to feel this too. Not because it's content, but because it's truth.